The commitment to consistency leads to prosperity in business. It's an indicator that your business has a purpose and a direction of importance and clarity, which will help your brand and voice within entrepreneurship grow. Taking the reins of any successful business starts, my friends, by telling a compelling brand story. And if we take a closer look at the numbers, you'll quickly discover that brand consistency is the name of the game. In 2025, for example, 68% of organizations report that their brand consistency has contributed to at least a 10% hike in their revenue and growth. Meanwhile, 82% of organizations report that they use a template to ensure brand consistency across all of their platforms. Meanwhile, 16% of all organizations across the country use them for design and their creative teams. According to the Capital One shopping report, the report also indicated that over 70% of small businesses believe that branding is a critical component to their overall growth and prosperity. And finally, over 90% of all consumers say that they respond most favorably to personalized marketing. Someone who knows how to tell a compelling brand story is my friend Adam Torres. He's the co-founder of Mission Matters Media, a branding and book publishing agency. He's dedicated to amplifying the voices of entrepreneurs, entertainers, executives, and experts. He's also an international best-selling author, speaker, and the host of Mission Matters, a series of shows ranked in the top 2.5% of podcasting globally. Throughout his platforms, he's got over 25 million viewers. His advice and expertise has regularly been featured in publications such as Forbes, Yahoo Finance, Fox Business, and CBS, just to name a few. And Torres joined me this week to have a conversation about brand building, effective messaging, and how telling an effective human story and humanizing your personal brand to connect with your own personal identity can be your secret weapon to success. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. If you're ready, my friend, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program. And I'm super excited to learn about your experience in media and everything in between. It's great to see you, my friend, and thank you for a few minutes.
Let's do it.
Absolutely, my friend. Now, Adam, I know that you are committed to amplifying the voices of entrepreneurs, entertainers, and executives who amplifying their brands, buddy. You're the co-founder of Mission Matters, which is a media and branding company and a publishing company as well, my friend. I don't know when you sleep, but I know that you're making a big difference, my friend. So tell me about your story and what makes you so fabulous, my friend.
Oh man, well I'll tell you one thing, Kevin. I think we all are. One of the reasons why are fabulous, and one of the reasons why I like podcasting and coming on shows is really to hopefully inspire others to tell their stories and to get out there and to share their mission. So that's the name of our company. That's the name of my podcast, by the way, Mission Matters. And I've recorded over 6,000 episodes in an effort to help others tell their story. And so my goal and my aim is to encourage everyone because I feel like everybody has a story and everybody should be heard.
Absolutely, my friend. And I know that you're on a mission to help over 1 billion people share their story of change and difference, my friend. So I'm curious to now ask you, how is that mission progressing? And what do you think makes a successful and a compelling story in terms of communicating it to the masses? My friend, what are your thoughts there?
So the first thing is, just if you look at the math, Kevin. So of course, you can't, I can't interview 1 billion people. My goal is to inspire other. Of course, I'll interview. I'll do this year. I'll do between 1,500 and 2,000 interviews. So just so you know, and I've done over 6,000 interviews. So I'm working hard to do what I can do. But as a company, we're also helping others launch shows as well. So we've helped others launch over 250 shows now, different podcasts shows, and we keep on doing that. So the aim and the goal is, if you just think about the math, it's how do we help 1,000 people do interviews? How do we help 2,000 people do interviews? How do we help so that if you think about the multiplication of that, the aim and the goal is to help others share their story. My personal aim and goal is to help as many as I can in my lifetime to do that. So how are we doing? We're just getting started, man. 250 shows. That's a lot, I feel, but it's we can do better. We can do more. So we're going to keep on.
We're keeping the train rolling down the track, right?
That's the way it's happening for sure.
Now, I enjoy your time interviewing people. I know that you've probably had great interviews and interviews that haven't gone as you would have hoped sometimes. So tell me, what do you think is the secret to conducting and making sure that you maximize the potential of an interview, my friend? What makes a great podcast interview in your view?
So the first thing is it all starts, and this might sound controversial, but I don't think it is. So it all starts with the host. So a lot of times people think that the guest, like in order to make a show grow or to make it good, you have to have like these really high profile guests, or they have to be celebrities or this or that. In my opinion, and if you look at the longevity of some of like the big careers that have been out there, some of the best people to ever do it. You think about somebody like a Johnny Carson who was on TV, 30 years. Or you look at some of these individuals, like the longevity of their career. When they started, they didn't have these huge guests. When they started, they were interviewing anybody. That's the way they had to do it to earn and to gain and to increase their craft and to increase the value of the conversations they were having. So, in my opinion, what does it take to have a great interview? It starts with the host. It starts with the host being involved in the interview process. It starts with them thinking about questions to pull out content from the guests, maybe that they feel haven't been asked before, or maybe they feel they can bring out some other pieces of the story and even take another dynamic that maybe hasn't been explored yet. So I'll give you one brief example, Kevin. So for example, I was covering this conference called the Milken Conference in Beverly Hills, California. It's a top conference. For context, it costs like 30 grand for a ticket, just for context. It's a big conference, one of the top 3 conferences probably in the world. I was interviewing their chief economist, and their chief economist, when you do an interview like that, you can kind of already think about what are the obvious questions. The obvious questions are, what's inflation going to be like? Like how the market, what's the market? The market's either doing good or it's doing bad, whatever the market's doing versus like the economy, right? Like those are obvious questions. The question that I asked him that I know nobody asked was I asked him, hey, how did you originally meet Michael Milken? Like, how did you originally get involved? And he told me this story, Kevin. He said, I knew that I was going to be an advocate and I wanted to work for Michael Milken when he originally did a deal way back in the day, and they said it was one of those deals that like he was crazy for doing because they said here goes the kicker, Kevin. He said because everybody thought that a 24-hour news channel was a stupid idea and not Michael Milken. He thought it was a great idea and helped to organize the funding for that. And that channel, CNN. So think about that. So a true visionary in that sense. So now think about, and I'm not saying that the other individuals that were doing interviews were not, good. I'm not saying that. I'm just comparing. So I got that story and I got an angle from him. Nobody else has that. Nobody has that response because everybody else is going to ask him just about the economy. Because why? Because they don't necessarily look at him as a person per se. They just look at his knowledge on, projecting what inflation is going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Adam, I know that you're a huge believer that entrepreneurs should invest in going on as many podcasts as possible, buddy. And outside of the obvious of growing their business and their brand, why do you think entrepreneurs should seriously consider going on podcasts?
I'll tell you, I personally hadn't gone on many people's podcasts in the past. This is the first year, so we're in 2025, and just for context, and I've never really done guesting. Normally, in the past, I was so busy focusing on creating shows and on doing interviews for my own shows, just based on the quantity I do, that I kind of overlooked going on other people's podcasts. I don't think I was being necessarily selfish, or I just really didn't understand the value of what that could do. And I'll tell you what I think the value is. I think the value is contributing energy to other people's shows. So when I think about it, thousands of people have come on my shows. It takes two people to do an interview. So I think the first thing is your computer, like even me coming on this show right now, we're creating a new piece of content together, Kevin. So that's a special thing to me. So why should they do it? Number one is to collaborate with other individuals. I think it's a very good way to build your network. And also, if you think about your personal brand and building your personal brand, it's helpful to be on the other side of the mic as well. So if you're always being interviewed, that's great. Like, that's great. I'm not saying don't be a host. I'm not saying don't launch your other show, but being interviewed is a different skill set. You're the one now talking. You're not the one answering the questions. You, Kevin, as the host, you're in control of this dialogue, not myself. Whereas if it was on my show, it'd be the opposite. So I think it's a very useful and helpful skill set to build as well, in terms of getting your story and your message out there.
Yeah, and Adam, I know that you're an accomplished public speaker as well, my friend, and you connect with audiences all the time. So I'm curious, my friend, what do you think makes a great public speaking message, and how do you most effectively connect with audiences in your view?
Yeah. For me, authenticity is the number one thing. So if you don't want, I've seen some speakers that, and no disrespect to them, they may still be trying to find their voice, but in order to be a great speaker, you don't have to be or sound like someone else. Like, I know some speakers that have a way higher energy level and they're basically shouting almost, and they may be very physical in their way of delivering a message. And then I know other speakers that are super impactful and powerful, but they don't even move around the stage much. Their voice, their inflection, their energy is all it takes, and they can deliver a rousing performance without all of the other stuff. And I'm not saying one's right versus the other, but I am saying that I do think it's important for people to find their lane. I think it's important for them to do things like take courses, join masterminds, to become involved with the speaking community as a whole, because that's the only way to really achieve true mastery. And if you're already great and you're already like, I don't need any of that stuff. Well, if you're already great, my advice to you would be you're going to be better, even better than you already are, if you take those actions, because you may be starting at a higher point because you may be a natural, but a natural can get way better with some structure.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Adam, I also want to talk to you about one of the most important components of building a brand, my friend, and that's providing content with value that you provide the market with value versus contraction or
Yeah.
subtracting from your message, my friend. So, what do you think is the key to providing value when creating content, my friend?
Well, I think that where many entrepreneurs go wrong when it comes to providing value is they're thinking they're not necessarily take into account the audience's perspective. So I'll give you an example. So when we first started, and when I was first in this business, my first shows were all about money. It was called Money Matters. It's before we evolved into Mission Matters. Now, Money Matters, we had some traction. We were doing pretty well, but we didn't. But it wasn't still really hitting the mark with our target audience. When we moved things to Mission, and when we looked at the content itself, that's when we really started to explode. It's when we became more aligned with what the overall vision was. So, but if we would have been stuck in that like idea of it had to be money, it had to be that show, the show has to be about only money, then we wouldn't have been able to evolve into something bigger. So we evolved into something bigger because we didn't fall in love with our first idea. Like our first idea is not necessarily the one that we're going to be on in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years, right? Like it can evolve.
Absolutely, and since you brought that up, one of the things that has worked for me, it being a podcaster and a speaker myself, Adam, is sharing parts of my personal story. So I will
Mm.
quickly share it with you. So, Adam, when I was born with what's called spastic quadriplegia cerebral palsy, and
Mm.
I found out at the age of 9 that I wouldn't be able to walk for the duration of my life
Mm.
without the assistance of a walker. And when I graduated college, it took me 6 years to get my first paying job because when I went on job interviews to become a sports reporter, because I have a degree in sports reporting, uh, news directors told me that I was qualified, but because of my disability, they wouldn't hire me. So
Mm.
I use my personal story to advocate for others to get hired with a disability. So I'm curious to ask you, how do you think you can use your personal story to build your brand? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah. Well, this goes back to authenticity. And I think that when everybody's not going to be your audience. So I'll give you an example of my personal story and how I use it. So one of the things that I like to tell people is, I was in finance for a long time. So almost 14 years. I managed hundreds of millions of dollars, and it was a great career before media as well, which I've been blessed here too. But I like to tell people because sometimes they see me now nice and polished, and they maybe think I come from money or a certain background, and I say, no, I'm from southwest side of Detroit, Michigan, and when I was growing up in the '80s, like that was a murder capital of the country, and it was a rough place. So when you think about where I came from versus some of the blessings I've been able to have in my life, and that all goes back to God. I'm not claiming I had all the foresight and this is all me, it's God. But I like to use my personal story to make it very relatable for people to be able to pursue their own missions the same way that you do in many ways. I think yours happen to be with a disability. Mine would be socioeconomic status. You could argue, at least for this country, I was definitely on the lower end of the socioeconomic food chain, we'll say. And also in terms of geography, like I wasn't from, a wealthy area. So all of those things could have been setbacks, and it may have been. But I like to use that story and to inspire others. And I think where sometimes people may have a kind of a misstep, or their brand or their show or other things don't kind of take off the way they can. It's when they hide that and they feel like everything has to, and the imperfections is what I mean. It's when they feel that everything has to be perfect. And the problem with that is that people can tell, like intuitively, they can tell, like, because they don't want to see you perfect all the time. They want to see your imperfections because that lets them know that that you're human too, number one, but number two, that lets them feel more connected to you and your brand as well. So
Yeah.
that's what people want.
Absolutely. And Adam, let's talk about your connection to Detroit, buddy, because one thing you may not know about me, buddy, is that I live in Windsor, which is the city right across the river from Detroit. So I'm
Yeah.
in Detroit a lot. So I,
I know Windsor. I know Windsor very well. I went. That's where we used to go. I don't know if I'm supposed to say it on this show, but let's just say it's many years ago when I was under the age of 21. We'd go to Windsor to maybe have a beverage or two that you could be 19 and partake of over in Windsor.
that is still a rule that many Americans still adopt, my friend.
So
So
I know Windsor well from back in the day, though. It's been many years.
absolutely, my friend. So tell me about your connection to this region. I know you went to Michigan
Yeah.
State, and
Go green.
what you still remember about this region, buddy?
Yeah, well, I'm born and raised there, first of all. So I didn't leave Michigan until after college. So my family still, many of them are still there, and I went to Michigan State. My mom went to U of M, so we were our household. I've been to many U of M games, many Michigan State games. So I was just a Michigan fan overall of sports, of everything really. I was in the. I know you're a sports buff, so I was in the big house when Charles Woodson caught all those interceptions, that epic game way back when I was a little kid then, but. Yeah, I just had a lot of fun growing up there, and I remember. So going back, I know you're a sports guy. Going back to my childhood, I remember the Pistons winning a bunch of championships. The Bad Boys. That's way back when. The young kids don't know what that was. Google it, ChatGPT it. The Bad Boys. Isaiah Thomas and the line beating up on Michael Jordan before he became the greatest of all times. Like that was the that was my childhood. So Michigan was well, and it did well for me, and that's where I grew out of.
And the Lions are respectable now. Now everything
Oh,
comes full circle, doesn't it?
Kevin, I got a story for you on that one. So I realized I didn't even know I had this childhood dream, but I realized it. So when Lions, when they weren't respectable way back when, we still had Barry Sanders. That was our one that we could always point to and talk about him. That was our pride for many years. So I had the opportunity to, I don't know if you saw the movie. It came out now, I think 2 years ago. Bye Bye Barry. It was maybe a year and a half ago, Thanksgiving. So my company, Mission Matters, we had the opportunity to work with Barry Sanders, and we actually published his autobiography that was based on. So we got to work with his team for I don't know a year and a half on putting out and publishing his book, which then became the Amazon. At that time, it set records on Amazon for the most streamed sports documentary ever.
Well, everything in life comes full circle, and I tell you, everything in life happens for a reason, doesn't it, Adam?
I'm God's will, man. I'm telling you, like we're blessed to wake up this morning.
Absolutely, my friend. Now, I want to get your thoughts on some research from PricewaterhouseCoopers, which came out this year, that indicates that 33% of consumers and customers, my friend, have paid a premium for companies that they trust, and additionally, 9 out of 10 or 91% of consumers say that they would buy from a company that has earned their trust, my friend.
Hmm.
So I'm curious about your thoughts on those findings and how important is trust when building a brand. What are your thoughts there?
So the most interesting, this is one of my favorite things about podcasting. So I'll just give a concept for somebody, and that concept, if you haven't heard it and you're listening to this, it's called one to many. So it's the concept of like, how does one person sell and or communicate a message to many people? So when you think about building trust, if I think about like a large company, like let's even go back to something like an Apple or a Steve Jobs, just because people know those examples, right? Like when you think about the products, when you think about when Steve Jobs would do a product release and when he would do something like that, they were all those things they were doing, and the customer service, everything that was behind it, the design of the box, that was all building a trust and building an expectation. So when I tell people with their audience in that case, which were consumers that would literally line the street when a new iPhone came out, like that's what they built, and that was based off of that trust and many other things, but trust was an ingredient and component of that. So one of the things I like about podcasting so much is it allows the top level, and I don't mean, I'm just the CEOs, the founders of companies, to communicate a message to let many people get to know who they are, what they are, their beliefs, their concepts, through interviews just like this, Kevin. And over time, that builds trust. So I like to think that our audience and Mission Matters as a whole, we have a lot of brand equity, and we have a lot of trust, not just with our audience, but also with those that come to us to help them publish books, for example, like going back to the Barry Sanders example. If we didn't have all of that content out there, if we didn't have all of the books, if we didn't do all those things, like would a name and one of the greatest, football players of all time, greatest running backs of all time, would that brand, a huge brand, would they have trusted us to be able to publish their book? Probably not. Probably not. You can't do that with just a nice website, right? Like that's not just we have a great fancy website, but there's no heart behind it. There's no communication. There's no trust. There's no brand equity there. Probably don't get big deals like that. For me, the trust side of things and even the premium that you're talking about, I mean, I don't for certain markets, depending what somebody's doing. And again, I know this is me speaking a little bit broadly, so I know it's going to change depending on your product, depending on your business. But that premium side of things, absolutely. And think about yourself. I'll pick on myself here. Am I willing to pay more for a brand that I know it's going to deliver for my expectation? Absolutely. Am I gonna go on Amazon and I know one brand and I know I bought them, I know they deliver on my expectation, but some random brand comes up below and it's 10% less or something, and it kind of seems similar. Which one am I gonna buy? I'm gonna go buy the brand I know and that I trust and that's delivered on its expectations in the past. No problem. I'm gonna do that every time.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Adam, if I asked you to come up with a recipe for 3 steps that any entrepreneur can take to amplify your brand, what do you think you would tell them and why?
I would say start a podcast, write a book, become a speaker. Those would be the 3 things, because those are your foundations. So your podcast, that's your catalog of content, so that anybody can Google you, they can search you, they can get to know who you are. So millions of people can get to know who you are based on your podcast. And if anybody Googles you over time, you get value from that, and over time your brand becomes bigger. And year over year, if you stick with it, your catalog gets bigger. And as your catalog gets bigger, the amount that you can charge in the market increases. And so that's number 1, start a podcast. Number 2, a book. Everybody should have a book. Why? Because think of that as like your ticket. That's like if you remember Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, that is your golden ticket. When I had and I didn't know this in the beginning. When I wrote my first book, I didn't even want to write a book. My mentor said I had to, and I'm like, I don't want to write a book. That doesn't even make sense. Who cares about books? Like, I didn't even want to. I did it. I published it, and now I went from being paying to be on stage when I was managing money as an advisor to getting paid. I became a paid speaker. So that really is your golden ticket to the other side of becoming a paid speaker, and also to creating platforms and to helping more people and to distributing your message and or your product. It just depends. I happen to be in the media business. I can't think of a business. Every business can benefit from a podcast and from having a book, especially from the leader and if the CEO and the co-founder are doing that. And then the third thing is being a speaker. In the beginning, I kind of misunderstood the speaking side of things. I thought it was just like maybe somebody that wanted to be up in front of stage and needed all this attention. No, that's not what it is. For some people, it may be, but it doesn't have to be your story. The reason to become a speaker is because if you really want to help people in whatever your field is, whether it's to help them based on something digital that you're doing and want to promote, or if it's a physical product, I don't care what it is. You get up there, you share your story, you can really change lives. And that's what I've learned. So if you want to help people, if you want to change lives with your product and even just with your being, become a speaker as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious to ask you about your perspective on diversity, equity, and inclusion in business for organizations and entrepreneurs. I spend my time advocating for organizations and businesses to hire folks with disabilities. So I'm curious to get your perspective on why hiring someone with a disability provides a business with competitive advantage, and your thoughts on diversity, equity, and inclusion overall. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, I know that's a pretty controversial topic right now. It seems like the pendulum has shifted, and DE&I initiatives and all of these things are getting like funding pulled and things like that. But the way that I like to approach this is I'm a product of, and people can Google this because maybe depending on how young they are, they don't even know. But I'm a product of affirmative action. Like when I was going to college, like affirmative action was a very strong program, and it required universities to have a certain amount of minorities that were part of their roster and that were admitted. So I went to, within Michigan State, I went to a small residential honors college called James Madison College. Would I have gotten into James Madison College without that affirmative action program? Maybe not. I don't know. I can't say that I would have, and when I look at the demographic of students, and nothing against James Madison, it's a great college, but it just wasn't a priority back then. So I think sometimes, like just like anything in life, if you don't take care of it, if you don't have intent with it, it kind of disappears sometimes. Like things can go away if you don't take care of them. I'd be very careful for companies that if they're not told they have to do it, they can still do things. They can still have programs. They can still make really, even if it's not, and if it was taken out of law to where you don't have to do certain things. And I know there's like a disability, different things that are like by law that you have to have, and I don't know if it's directly related to hiring, but my point being, if you don't take care of, and if you don't make sure to put effort and resources towards those things, I think the companies that do long term will outpace. That they'll outpace you, and little by little things will change because especially when it comes to when you're thinking about boards at the board level, the representation to see different perspectives. At one point it was pretty homogenous, and maybe in some companies it is still homogenous, but one way of thinking, if everybody went to the same school, everybody looks the same, everybody, like there's no diversity of ideas, of opinions, of things like so. I think the companies that embrace it will do better long term.
Mm-hmm. And Adam, I'm overall curious to get your perspective on what makes a great leader of an organization, and what's your opinion on effective leadership, my friend?
I like leading from the front line. I mean, those were the leaders that that have always inspired me as somebody that either did it themselves or weren't scared to do it or to roll up their sleeves and to get their hands dirty, so to speak. Like those are the type of leaders I follow, and those are the type of leaders that's the type of leader that I try to be. So a small example could be, I mentioned we do a lot in the podcast space. Well, guess who the first editor was here? It was me. I was the first one to edit. Now we have a whole department, and we have a large team that does the editing, and we put out thousands of episodes. But who is the first editor? Me. So what that means is when I have conversations with the editing department, or I should say with the director of the podcast agency, Matt Cook, and he's then we're having a different type of conversation. Like I've been in the weeds, I've been in the trenches, so I understand the language and I understand the business of things. So I like for leaders to get their hand just dirty a little bit, and get into the weeds a bit, and be on the front line, and lead from example for your organization.
Yeah, and as a top 2.5% podcaster, I know that you've got over 25 million viewers on all of your platforms, my friend. And I'm curious because, I use the line all the time, if you don't have a book, you have a podcast. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, how do you think entrepreneurs and those that want to build a brand can remain or sort of exclude themselves from being saturated if they start a podcast? So what's the key to not becoming saturated when you start a podcast, my friend?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is, I even the premise of your question, Kevin, it's not that it's not a good question. It's that I just don't even agree with the premise. And I'll tell you why. To say that when somebody starts a podcast that they to not be saturated, it gives light to the fact that that's a possibility. That's at this point in the market, that's not even possible, and I'll explain to you why. YouTube, there's over 150 million YouTube channels. Podcasts, there's less than 4 million. Podcasting is like in year one of YouTube's growth right now. One day there's going to be 100 million podcasts. There's many reasons for that, and a big part of it is that now you're able to monetize smaller shows. In the past, podcasting came out of radio, so I know you have a sports background. So think about it this way: in the past, for podcasting, you had to it was host read ads, so only big shows, because you have to have a big advertiser, right, for the production and to read the ad. There wasn't what's called dynamic advertising, where you could monetize a small show, just like on YouTube back in the day, where you could monetize even small shows. So what's going to happen with podcasts is now there's more people that will launch them. The advertising dollars, now that there's dynamic advertising, it's easier to buy. The technology is caught up. If you combine that with Apple and Spotify and the billions of dollars that they're investing in the infrastructure of podcasting over the years, that leaves a really solid foundation. And so that being said, how can it be saturated? You can't be saturated. There's less than 4 million of them. It's not even a possibility at this point. If you think it can be, the reason you think of it is because you don't know. You're not looking at the macro perspective. Over 150 million YouTube channels out there, less than 4 million podcasts. We're in year one of YouTube for podcasting, as I said. So not even a possibility, Kevin.
Well, I'm happy that possibilities are endless, my friend. And I've got two quick questions to end our conversation, my friend.
Yeah.
I asked you earlier about connecting with an audience as a speaker, but as a speaker yourself, I'm curious to get your thoughts on what are the great elements of a great speech, in your opinion, my friend?
Oh, that's good. That's a good question, Kevin. It's the connection. I think it's the connection with the audience. I think that connection and like a great speech or a great speaker, they're so orchestrated. Like they make it seem so seamless. But it's an act. It's just like an actor up there doing a performance. Like it's so the intonation, the words, the delivery, the control of the audience. Think about the way a comedian gets up there and does the same gig every night and can know within a millisecond of when that audience response is going to come. To me, I think a great speaker has all of those elements. And over time, I don't think it's quantity of speeches, is, I think it's quality. Like to me, I'd love to hear a great speaker. I think about when I think about great speakers, I think of people like Les Brown. I think about his work. I think about Tim Story, who I actually have coming on the podcast in July, which I'm really excited. I've been working on getting that interview for 2 years. Tim Story's coming on. I think he's another. That's one of my favorite present day speakers. But Les Brown, you look at the greats from way back when, the Jim Rohns. I mean, these guys were super orchestrated, super professional, and they had connection with their audience, understood their audience, their delivery, their message on point. So I think those are some of the ingredients that make up a great speaker.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing those, my friend. And my final question for you, Adam, has to do with personal grit and determination. You know, I always end my podcast by asking about legacy and how you want it to be defined. And I'm going to modify that question for you just a little bit because I'm intrigued to get your answer in this respect in terms of, you know, determination and grit and seizing success in life isn't always easy. So I'm curious, when you look at your own personal life mission, how much is personal determination and grit sort of amplifying everything you do every day?
I don't know. I mean, for me, Kevin, I know those are strong words like personal determination, grit, and all these things. But to me, that starts with like self. And I think to me, it's one that's my life has been so unbelievable. Like just some of the things I've gotten to do, in my opinion, that I think I value the word prayer more than those. Like I pray and I just understand that it's in God's time, these things, and that it's a blessing to wake up and to be able to do what we do. So
Mm-hmm.
I would put more emphasis on God and saying it's prayer and it's trying to have that relationship and build that relationship, and out of that things, maybe I get some credit for personal determination or grit, but not really. I think it's more my faith and just understanding the blessings around me and continuing to be grateful for those, and to look for the signs, that I'm, living and fulfilling not just what I think I'm supposed to be doing, but His will ultimately. Like I think that's probably a little bit more what I lean on versus my own grit. Because if we have to do it to my grit, man, I'll tell you what I wanted to do this morning. This morning I was like, oh man, I want to go back to sleep. I want to hit the snooze button, baby. I don't want to drink a smoothie or eat some egg whites. Let me have some pizza. Like I don't. Like that's where if I was relying on my own personal determination and grit, Kevin, I'd be maybe 150 pounds heavier, and I'd be broke, man.
Yeah.
It's all God, brother.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. So let me ask the final question this way then. So if you had to write like your personal mission, I know you help people write and think about their mission and why it matters. So if you had to write your own personal mission statement, what do you think it would entail and why would you write it the way you would, my friend?
Yeah, for me, my mission, it actually does coincide with my company's mission, and that's to amplify stories and to give others a voice. Like where I come from, a lot of people maybe in the past either didn't have a voice or they didn't have the ability, or at least they thought mentally that they didn't have the ability to get to share their stories or to get their voice out there. In the past, think about it. I like to think about it this way: whoever had the money, whoever had the power, that's who wrote the narrative of our histories. And sometimes that might have been nefarious and to wipe out certain points of history. Sometimes it might have been just who had the resources, who had access to the printing presses, what were the companies, who had you go far enough back, who had the chisel and the stone tablet. I don't know. Who knew how to write, who knew how to read. Like these were the things. This is how our stories and narratives were done in the past. But now with the advent of social media and podcasting, all these other things, we all get to participate. So my mission is to help others amplify their stories and to create content on their own. And if I did have any legacy that anybody was to remember, that's not the goal of this. If it was, I'd want it to be, somebody that was known for his faith, and then someone that helped people. Like that's it. Like someone that helped people get their messages out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And Finally, Adam, tell me, if people want to get connected with all the great work that you do, buddy, what's the most efficient way they can do that?
Oh, that's easy. Just go on Instagram, ask Adam Torres, shoot me a DM, send me a message if you're working on a book, a podcast, anything like that. Love to hear what you're working on. Ask Adam Torres on Instagram, and there's a link there to our link tree, which has all kinds of stuff. You talk about free content. We have ebooks, how to write a bestseller, how to launch a show, a podcast. We got more free content on there. Weekly newsletter. We give away more free content, I believe, than any other company on the planet of our size. So just check out my Instagram. Ask Adam Torres. Simple.
Well, Adam is one Detroit lover to another, my friend. I really appreciated your time this afternoon and your insights on entrepreneurship, podcasting, and everything in between, my friend. You're really doing yeoman's work of good, my friend, and I want to thank you for engaging in conversation with me this afternoon. It's most appreciated.
Appreciate all you're doing, Kevin, and keep up the great work, man. You rock.
The commitment to consistency leads to prosperity in business. It's an indicator that your business has a purpose and a direction of importance and clarity, which will help your brand and voice within entrepreneurship grow. Taking the reins of any successful business starts, my friends, by telling a compelling brand story. And if we take a closer look at the numbers, you'll quickly discover that brand consistency is the name of the game. In 2025, for example, 68% of organizations report that their brand consistency has contributed to at least a 10% hike in their revenue and growth. Meanwhile, 82% of organizations report that they use a template to ensure brand consistency across all of their platforms. Meanwhile, 16% of all organizations across the country use them for design and their creative teams. According to the Capital One shopping report, the report also indicated that over 70% of small businesses believe that branding is a critical component to their overall growth and prosperity. And finally, over 90% of all consumers say that they respond most favorably to personalized marketing. Someone who knows how to tell a compelling brand story is my friend Adam Torres. He's the co-founder of Mission Matters Media, a branding and book publishing agency. He's dedicated to amplifying the voices of entrepreneurs, entertainers, executives, and experts. He's also an international best-selling author, speaker, and the host of Mission Matters, a series of shows ranked in the top 2.5% of podcasting globally. Throughout his platforms, he's got over 25 million viewers. His advice and expertise has regularly been featured in publications such as Forbes, Yahoo Finance, Fox Business, and CBS just to name a few. And Torres joined me this week to have a conversation about brand building, effective messaging, and how telling an effective human story and humanizing your personal brand to connect with your own personal identity can be your secret weapon to success. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation.